Hey everyone, welcome back to Senior Care Insights. I think it's safe to say we've all been there, suddenly wide awake at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling. It's frustrating, and let's face it, a little unnerving. So today we're going to explore those pesky 3 a.m. wake-ups, why they happen, and what you can actually do about them.
What's interesting is that we often see these early morning awakenings as a sign of something being wrong, especially as we get older. But sometimes it's less about a problem and more like our body trying to tell us something.
Okay, that's an intriguing way to look at it. But still, 3 a.m. It feels like prime sleeping time. So what might our bodies be trying to communicate?
Well, think of it this way. You wouldn't ignore a flashing check engine light in your car, right? It's a signal to investigate. Similarly, regularly waking up between 3 and 5 a.m., especially if it's accompanied by a sense of unease, can be a subtle cue to pay attention to what might be going on.
So it's like our internal alarm clock is going off a bit too early. What's the first thing we should do when we find ourselves in this situation? Most of us probably just try to force ourselves back to sleep.
You're absolutely right. That's the most common reaction. But ironically, trying to force sleep often makes things worse. It's like trying to cram for a test last minute. You might get some information in, but it's not going to be your best work.
That makes sense. I know when I lie there stressing about how much sleep I'm not getting, it just makes me feel more anxious.
Exactly. And that anxiety triggers the release of cortisol, the stress hormone, which actually makes it even harder to fall asleep.
So we need to break that stress cycle.
Mm-hmm.
What's a better approach than lying there wrestling with insomnia?
Instead of getting caught in that mental trap, try a simple shift. Sit up in bed. This slight change in posture can actually signal to your brain that you're not just passively stewing in worry. Then focus on your breath. Inhale deeply through your nose for a count of 4, hold for a moment, and exhale slowly through your mouth for a count of 6.
It's like a mini meditation right there in bed.
Precisely. This kind of deep, rhythmic breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for relaxation and calming your body down.
So we're calming the mind and the body. Now, I bet there are also some practical things we can do in our sleep environment to make it easier to fall back asleep.
Absolutely. It's like being a detective in your own bedroom. Is your pillow feeling flat? Are you tangled up in your sheets? Is the room too hot or too cold? You might be surprised how these little discomforts can disrupt your sleep without you even realizing it.
Oh, I'm definitely guilty of the tangled sheets thing.
We've all been there. But here's a key. Address those issues immediately. Don't just suffer through them. Fluff that pillow, untangle the sheets, adjust the thermostat. Ideally, your bedroom temperature should be between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit for optimal sleep.
Okay, so we're breathing deeply. We've turned into sleep detectives. We've optimized our environment. But what if we're still wide awake? Is it a lost cause at that point?
Now, this is where things get really interesting. What if instead of viewing those pre-dawn hours as lost sleep, we saw them as a unique opportunity?
I'm all ears. What kind of opportunity are we talking about at 3 in the morning?
Well, some of history's most creative minds, people like Leonardo da Vinci and Nikola Tesla, actually utilized this time to fuel their work. They understood that the quiet and mental clarity of the early morning hours could be a powerful tool.
So you're suggesting we could actually embrace the 3 a.m. wake up and turn it into a creative advantage.
Exactly. Keep a notebook by your bed, and if you wake up, jot down any thoughts, ideas, or solutions that come to mind. Don't censor yourself, just let it flow. You might be amazed by the insights that surface during this time.
That's a brilliant reframing. But what if writing isn't really my thing? Are there other ways to tap into this potential?
Absolutely. If writing doesn't appeal to you, explore other calming activities like gentle stretching visualization, or simply sitting quietly and observing the stillness of the early morning. The key is to find something that helps you relax and avoid anything stimulating, especially screens.
So we're shifting our perspective from fighting sleep to embracing the opportunity for quiet reflection and maybe even a little creativity. I love it. Now, I know dehydration can also disrupt sleep. Is that something we should be paying attention to when we wake up in the middle of the night?
It's a great point and often overlooked. Even while we sleep, our bodies lose water through breathing and perspiration. So if you wake up feeling thirsty, don't hesitate to have a drink. But there's a right and a wrong way to hydrate at night.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the best way to hydrate in the middle of the night? I usually just grab a glass of ice water.
While that might seem refreshing, that ice-cold water can actually be a bit of a shock to your system at that hour.
So no midnight ice water raids. Good to know.
Instead, reach for room temperature or even slightly warm water. It's gentler on your stomach and won't jolt you awake. And here's a little bonus tip. Add a pinch of high-quality sea salt to replenish electrolytes.
Electrolytes, that's important. It's not just about the water. It's about those essential minerals that help our bodies function properly.
Exactly. You can even add a splash of lemon juice for taste and to aid digestion.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground already. We've talked about breathing techniques, optimizing our sleep environment, embracing the pre-dawn hours, and hydrating smartly. Is there anything else that might contribute to those 3 a.m. wake-ups?
There's one more piece of the puzzle we need to explore, and it might be the most important one of all: our emotions.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting.
You got it. In traditional Chinese medicine, the time between 3 and 5 a.m. is associated with the lungs. And the lungs, according to this ancient system, are closely linked to emotions like sadness, grief, and stress.
So waking up feeling heavy-hearted or anxious might not just be a coincidence. It could be our bodies processing those emotions during this time.
That's the idea. If you find yourself waking up with a racing mind or feeling emotionally overwhelmed, don't try to ignore it. Acknowledge those feelings, even if it's just for a moment. Give yourself space to feel them.
That's a powerful concept. But what's the best way to do that at 3 in the morning? Should I be scheduling a therapy session at that hour?
No need for late-night therapy sessions. Journaling can be incredibly helpful. Keep a notebook by your bed, and if those worries or heavy emotions wake you up, just jot them down. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece. Just get it out of your head and onto the page.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like giving your brain a place to put those worries so they don't keep swirling around in your head, preventing you from falling back asleep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can combine journaling with those deep, calming breaths we talked about earlier. Remember, inhale for 4, exhale for 6. This further helps to soothe your nervous system. The goal isn't to solve all your problems at 4 a.m., but to acknowledge those emotions and release some of the tension they're creating.
So we've covered breathing environment, hydration, and emotional processing. Anything else we can do to help ourselves fall back asleep if we're still awake?
Here's one you might not expect: gentle movement. Staying rigidly still can actually make you feel more restless, which of course makes it harder to fall back asleep.
You mean we shouldn't just lie there like a statue hoping to magically drift off?
Exactly. Instead, try a few gentle movements to release tension and get your blood flowing. Simple things like neck rolls, shoulder shrugs, and even just shaking your legs a bit can make a difference.
I could see how that would help. Sometimes I wake up feeling stiff and achy. It would probably feel good to get things moving a bit.
It's like a gentle reset for your body. And as always, remember to focus on slow, controlled breathing while you do these movements. It helps to further activate that relaxation response we're aiming for.
These are all such fantastic tips. I love how they shift our whole perspective on those 3 a.m. wake-ups. It's not about battling our bodies. It's about listening to them and responding with care.
Precisely. And speaking of listening, there's one more powerful tool we can use to calm a racing mind and encourage sleep.
Sound. I'm all ears, literally.
When your mind is buzzing with thoughts, the right sounds can help distract you and create a more soothing environment for sleep. You've probably heard of white noise, but there's another type of sound that's even more effective for sleep: pink noise.
Pink noise, that's a new one for me.
Think of it as white noise's more mellow cousin. It has deeper, more natural qualities, similar to the sound of rain, wind, or ocean waves.
Okay, that does sound pretty relaxing. But does it actually help with sleep?
There's actually scientific evidence to back that up. Research suggests that pink noise can synchronize brainwaves with sleep patterns, making it easier to drift off and stay asleep. It's even been shown to potentially improve memory.
Wow, that's amazing. So we can play pink noise in the background to help lull ourselves back to sleep. Are there any other sound options that might work?
Absolutely. If pink noise isn't your thing, you could try a short guided sleep meditation, keep it to 5 or 10 minutes max, or even listening to a monotone audiobook. The key is to have a gentle focal point for your mind that doesn't involve screens or anything too stimulating.
That's a great point about avoiding screens. I know I'm definitely guilty of scrolling on my phone in the middle of the night, and it never really helps me get back to sleep.
It's such a tempting habit, but that blue light emitted from screens actually suppresses melatonin, the hormone that helps regulate our sleep-wake cycle. So it's best to avoid screens at least an hour before bed, and definitely if you wake up in the middle of the night.
Great advice. We've covered so much ground today, from breathing techniques to sound therapy. It seems like there are so many things we can do to manage those 3 a.m. wake-ups and even turn them into a positive experience.
Exactly. And the most important thing is to find what works best for you. Experiment with these different techniques and see what helps you feel most relaxed and ready for sleep.
That's a great reminder. There's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to sleep. We each need to discover what works best for our individual needs and preferences. This has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of 3 a.m. wake-ups, and we still got more to uncover. Make sure to join us for part 2, where we continue this conversation.
As we've been discussing these 3 a.m. wake-ups, I've been thinking about how we often view those early morning hours with a sense of dread.
It's true, we see it as lost sleep time stolen from our rest.
But what if we shifted our perspective? What if we saw those hours as a time for gentle self-discovery?
Ooh, I like where you're going with this.
Yeah.
What do you mean by gentle self-discovery?
Instead of battling to get back to sleep, what if we use that time to simply check in with ourselves? How are we feeling physically, emotionally? What's on our minds?
It's like a quiet pause before the day begins, a chance to connect with ourselves without all the usual distractions.
Precisely. And you might be surprised by what you discover during this quiet time. Maybe it's a lingering worry that needs to be addressed, or a creative spark that ignites during those peaceful hours.
This reminds me of what you mentioned earlier about traditional Chinese medicine linking the lungs to emotions like sadness and grief, and how those feelings might surface during this time.
That's right. And if we resist those feelings, try to push them down, it can actually make it harder to fall back asleep. But if we acknowledge them, even just for a few moments, it can help release some of that tension.
So instead of fighting the wake-up, we can use it as an opportunity to process those emotions. Maybe even journal about them like we talked about before.
Exactly. Journaling is a fantastic tool for emotional processing. It allows us to externalize our thoughts and feelings, get them out of our heads and onto the page.
I've also heard that journaling can even help improve sleep quality over time. Is there any truth to that?
There is. Studies have shown that writing about emotional experiences, even for just 15 minutes, can reduce anxiety and promote better sleep.
That's incredible. So by simply taking a few minutes to write down what's on our minds, we can actually help ourselves sleep better in the long run.
It's a powerful tool, and it doesn't have to be a long, detailed entry. Even a few lines can make a difference.
So we're shifting our mindset from dreading those 3 a.m. wake-ups to seeing them as a potential source of insight and even a pathway to better sleep. Now, this whole idea of waking up in the middle of the night makes me think about something I read recently about biphasic sleep. Could that be connected to what we're talking about?
It's an interesting connection. Biphasic sleep refers to a historical sleep pattern where people would sleep in two distinct chunks with a period of wakefulness in between.
Wait, so you're saying that people used to go to bed, wake up for a while, and go back to sleep again?
Exactly. This was common before the advent of artificial lighting. People would go to bed early, sleep for a few hours, wake up for an hour or two, and then go back to sleep until morning.
Wow, I had no idea. So those 3 a.m. wake-ups might actually be a natural part of our sleep cycle that's been suppressed by modern lifestyles.
That's one theory. And during that wakeful period, people would often engage in quiet activities like reading, praying, or even socializing.
It's fascinating to think about how our relationship with sleep has evolved over time.
Absolutely. And maybe there's something to be said for reclaiming those quiet hours, even if it's just for a few minutes each night.
It's like rediscovering a lost art, the art of stillness and self-reflection in the middle of the night.
And who knows, maybe those quiet moments hold the key to unlocking new levels of creativity, insight, and even emotional well-being.
I love that perspective. So if we find ourselves awake at 3 a.m. instead of stressing about it, we can embrace those quiet hours and see what emerges.
Exactly. And remember, if you do want to try and get back to sleep, we have all those tools we discussed earlier: breathing techniques, optimizing your sleep environment, hydration, and sound therapy.
This has been such a fascinating exploration of the 3 a.m. wake-up. We've learned about the potential causes, the science behind it, and most importantly, how to manage it effectively.
And remember, it's not about forcing ourselves back to sleep, but about finding ways to care for ourselves during those early morning hours.
Absolutely. This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive, but we're not quite finished yet. Be sure to join us for part 3, where we'll wrap up our discussion and share a final takeaway message. Through this whole conversation about 3 a.m. wake-ups, I've realized how often we approach sleep as this battle that we have to win.
That's such a great point. We put so much pressure on ourselves to get a perfect night's sleep, and when we wake up in the middle of the night, it feels like a defeat.
Exactly. It's like we're at war with our own bodies, and it creates so much stress.
And that stress, of course, only makes it harder to fall back asleep.
It's a vicious cycle.
Huh.
So what's the alternative? How can we change our mindset around sleep?
What if instead of fighting, we surrendered to the moment? What if we embraced those quiet hours as a time for rest and rejuvenation, even if we're not technically asleep?
I love that idea. It takes the pressure off of having to fall back asleep immediately
Yeah.
and allows us to just be present in the moment.
Exactly. It could be a time for gentle stretching, deep breathing, listening to calming music, or simply observing the stillness of the night.
It's like expanding our definition of rest to include more than just sleep.
Precisely. And who knows, by embracing that stillness and letting go of the struggle, we might actually find ourselves drifting back to sleep more easily.
It's like we're giving our bodies permission to rest rather than demanding it.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And I think there's a powerful lesson in that for all aspects of our lives, sometimes when we let go of the struggle, we find exactly what we're looking for.
That's a profound thought. So if we find ourselves awake at 3 a.m. instead of getting frustrated, we can choose to see it as a gift, a time for stillness and self-care.
Precisely. And even if we don't fall back asleep right away, we can still emerge from those quiet hours feeling more rested, refreshed, and connected to ourselves.
This has been such an enlightening conversation. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on those 3 a.m. wake-ups. What would you say is the key takeaway you want listeners to remember from our deep dive today?
I think the most important thing to remember is that those early morning hours can be a source of stress and frustration, but they can also be a time for deep rest, self-discovery, and even creativity. The key is to shift our mindset from fighting sleep to embracing the opportunity for self-care and stillness.
That's beautifully said. So the next time you find yourself awake at 3 a.m., remember to breathe deeply. Check in with your body and your emotions, and see if you can find a moment of peace in the stillness of the night.
And who knows, you might even discover a hidden source of inspiration or insight.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. I know we'll be approaching those 3 a.m. wake-ups with a whole new attitude from now on.
It was my pleasure.
And to all of our listeners out there, we hope you found this deep dive helpful if you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and leave us a comment below. And most importantly, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into fascinating topics. Until next time, sweet dreams.